I'm Linda Coles, and this is Tell Us a Story. Matthew Mewse, also known as the Telephone Man, is a business by phone specialist. He works with companies across a wide range of industries and services, helping with their inbound and outbound calling, their call handling, new business acquisition, and offers client and customer care programs. He works with teams and people to help them get more out of one word they want to hear in business on the phone every day. You've guessed it, the word yes. He is the author of 2 books, Supersize Your Sales and Cold Calling Rules. He's also the wearer of a skinny tie, which according to Google, there are rules around just how skinny ties should be worn. And if you don't believe me, look them up. Anyway, we're not here to talk about skinny ties so much. We're here to talk about picking up the telephone. So welcome to the show, Matthew Mewse.
Oh, thank you, Linda. It's very nice to have a chance to chat with you, skinny tie and all.
I remember back in the day, I'm not sure why I put a West Country accent on there, going to the youth club and all the boys that I liked then had skinny ties, and they're all back in fashion.
Did they? Well, they are. And I'm not really a fashion hound, as you might guess, but I do like suits. And I try and wear the tie that goes with them. And on this occasion, it happens to be a skinny one.
Well, it also adds to individuality, doesn't it? It's a bit of a style quirk. Very cool. So let's start with you, Matthew. How did you pick up the moniker of the Telephone Man? Tell us all about how that happened.
Well, I've actually only had 2 careers in my life, Linda. The one that I've got now and the other one was the entertainment industry. You can probably tell by my accent that I'm actually English. I come from London originally. And the first job I ever had was carrying speaker cabinets around, and maybe there's a few of your listeners who are old rock and rollers and remember this band, for a band called Ian Dury and the Blockheads.
Oh, I remember it, yes.
I used to carry the speaker cabinets around. I did that for lots of years. And in England, we call it a humper. Now, I know in New Zealand it's got other connotations, but in England it meant you carried the speaker cabinets around. And for several years, I graduated from that into being road crew, and then onto stage crew, and then into touring crew. And I moved into looking after all the instruments. I guess the word there is roadie, that people would recognise. And after several years of doing that as well, I moved into stage management, tour management, and production management. And I was very lucky. I got to work with bands like, do you remember Genesis?
Yes.
Bands like that.
Yes.
And I worked on the U2 tours and quite a lot about Tina Turner. I toured through Europe, and I did that for about 10 years. And on my travels, I met a wonderful New Zealand woman, and we decided that we would come to New Zealand and make babies. So we took our stashes and we arrived in New Zealand, and wow, what a country it was, Linda. You know, when I got here, it was just beautiful. The customs welcomed me in and the immigration shook my hand. And I thought, this is great. I'm going to make a new life here. I know I'll work in the rock and roll business in New Zealand. Well, there really wasn't one. Years ago, we used to get 2 or maybe 3 big bands come through. And we get the Dire Straits and Bowie and Queen had come through, and I'd do all of those, but it wasn't enough to keep me busy full time. So I ended up working with quite a few New Zealand bands like Herbs. I don't know if you remember Herbs. They were kind of New Zealand's biggest Pacific reggae Maori band. And I tour managed them and quite a few others in New Zealand. But, you know, Linda, I used to come back from a tour like that and look at my paycheck, and there'd be a couple of zeros missing off it. And I thought, well, I've got a young son now. I don't really want to go back to Europe to earn what I'm used to earning. Perhaps I should go to Australia. So I headed off to Australia, and I worked with bands like Midnight Oil and John Farnham, that kind of thing. And I remember clearly coming back from about 6 months on the road and walking into my house, and my little boy wanted to know who this strange guy in the house was. So I thought, I've got to do something about this, you know. But I don't know, Linda, have you ever actually retrained for anything yourself? Have you ever reinvented what you do?
Absolutely have, yes. A few years back now, but yes, 2002-ish.
Takes courage, and I really admire that. But I didn't have the courage at the time. So what I did is I ended up working and helping with the Mount Smart Super Top, which was a great big tent over the car park that took 10,000 people. And after about a year or so, I just about had enough of that. And I thought, well, I wonder what I can do. All I know is the entertainment industry. What does that teach you how to do? And then I thought, well, if you know how to get the top E string for a prima donna lead guitarist at 2:30 in the morning in the snow in Prague by knocking on a music room shop door, then you might know how to make a sales presentation. So I went out, spent a lot of money, invested in learning how to sell, learn how to make a presentation. I even did a seminar on dress for success, and I've still no idea what that was all about. But I got a job as a salesperson. And after a period of time, I settled into a corporate after several jobs and found that I rose into a sales manager's job. And I had a team working for me. And I remember the eureka moment for me was we worked in the service industry. And I'm sure you know Rosebank Road. Many of your listeners will.
Yeah.
It's just full of business, isn't it, everywhere? And I dropped half of my team on one side of the road and me and the other half on the other side. And we knocked on every single door and every single business, got back to the office. We had 4 maybes and 2 possibles, a demotivated team and exhausted. And I thought, well, there's got to be a better way. So that night I went home and I designed my first telephone presentation, a call guide, if you will. And I came into the office the next morning at 9 o'clock in the morning. I got on the phone, and by midday, I had 18 appointments qualified, of which 12 turned into business.
Excellent.
Now, when I tell that story, Linda, it surprised a lot of people look at it and go, yeah, well, that's actually a big deal. I mean, not only did we get really good business from it, but we saved a lot of money on shoe leather. And I got pretty excited about the phone. And within 3 months, I'd resigned from my sales manager's job. And because there was no one teaching how to use the phone, yeah, sure, there were a couple of customer service courses, but nothing that really got into the nitty gritty of what I considered was a fantastic tool. And so I went off and learned how to sell. I spent about 7 or 8 years in the daytime selling business to business on the phone. And in the evenings, I would sell to consumer, to residential. Sold just about everything you can think of on the phone. I've sold computers, I've sold insurance, I've sold charity, appointments. I've even sold, Linda, adult products on the telephone. It's true. My wife even has the back catalogue somewhere.
Well, why not? Why not?
And so I did that for 7, 8 years, and I made a lot of money, to be honest, at business by phone. And after a while, I succumbed to the offer to move into team leadership and then into call center management and then national call center management, where I had 3 to 4 call centers that I managed throughout the country. And then about 18 years ago, I thought, well, can I take what I've now learned, what I've developed, and go out and show people how they can be successful in business on the phone? And so I've gone from setting up stages for superstars to perform on to helping people become superstars on the telephone. And that's the story of my journey to become the telephone man.
Very cool, actually. It's something that a lot of us struggle with, which I'm sure we'll get onto in a minute. But when you speak to a crowd, what is it you're trying to get across to them when you're teaching how to use the telephone? You mentioned earlier on when we were before our recording about some power words. What are they all about? How do they fit in?
Well, I think that it's important to remember that the telephone is different from other forms that we communicate. I mean, when you and I meet face to face, we've got an awful lot of things going on for us, Linda. We've got our handshake, we've got our smile, the way we look. All these things are going on for us. But on the telephone, you've got none of that. Every word that comes out of your mouth on a phone call needs to have meaning. But have you noticed how some words don't have much meaning these days. I mean, we all go to the supermarket, we all go to restaurants, they tap you through the till and they say things like, oh, have a nice day. It doesn't really mean anything anymore. It's what I would call customer service fluff. It's not authentic, but some words still have meaning and they still have a lot of power when you use them in the right context, especially on the telephone and especially in business. And I'll give you a quick example of a couple here. Imagine. Now, imagine is a fantastic word. Imagine helps create empathy. If you can say to somebody, look, I can really imagine what that's like for you, you start getting over on their side. So imagine's a powerful word. But here's a really great one that you can use on the phone. You can use it so long as you keep it. And that word is promise. Oh, promise is such a powerful word. If you keep your promises, you're a very good person to do business with. And sometimes it's best to keep your promises, Linda, around doable things like calling someone back. Oh, look, I promise I'll give you a call back around about 2:00 tomorrow. Is that okay with you, Linda? And they say,
and that's an important thing. If you say, and that's just part of following up, isn't it? If you're telling somebody you're going to do something, that you do actually do it.
Absolutely. And the wonderful thing about setting up that call is that when I ring you the next day at 2 p.m., I can open my call with saying, Linda, look, it's Matthew calling you back, and I promised you that I would.
Yes.
So it's a nice way to start a call. Plus, if there's any of your listeners who don't think promise is a powerful word, tell you what, go and break it to a 5-year-old and you get back to me and let me know how you get on.
True.
Because promise means a lot. And probably, though, Linda, the two most powerful words I think you can use on the phone, and actually it's not those two, it's the other two. The two most powerful words that you can use on the phone are I understand, particularly when you're in a conflict, particularly when there's an issue. It could be over budget, it could be a perceived complaint, could be almost anything. When you say, look, I do understand there's an issue, you reach down the phone, you put your arm around them and you're saying, look, I'm on your side. You know, I understand there's a problem. So if you can imagine that we kept all of our promises in business and we understood our customers and clients and our fellow humans better, what a better world this would be.
Yeah, I absolutely would. I'm just thinking about what you said there. I understand. I mean, I've been in credit control before, when I worked in a computer distributors back in the UK a long time ago, and we were always left to call the people our accounts, the people that hadn't paid their bills, and a bit of empathy goes a long way, and I understand is a big empathetic word, isn't it?
It is. And I think, I can never help myself really. When somebody says, look, I've been in that situation on the phone, one of the things, if you are chasing any kind of debt or reconciliation of an account, is to get your hat on that says you're there to help, because chasing debt is a skill in itself, particularly where the phone's concerned. So ringing someone up and saying, look, I understand there's a problem. I've rung up to help you. Now, you get a completely different reaction when you begin with an opening statement like that, instead of, look, I'm ringing you up to find out when you're going to pay this account that's overdue. So as you know yourself, it's all really about engagement and relationships that you create and rapport when it comes to really making sure that both you and your client get the right result.
So why do you think, Matthew, why do you think a lot of people are afraid of the telephone? What is it that makes people think, I'm not sure, I'm ringing up asking for money, or I'm ringing up asking for an appointment? Why don't people like to sort of go down that route?
Well, in the modern world that I work in, I'm very lucky. I get to work with all sorts of different generations, and millennials as well. And often owners of businesses or team leaders say to me, I can't get them to pick up the phone. And I say, well, I have to tell you that some of the best exponents of the phone that I know are millennials. They're like everybody else. They may have been conditioned to a degree to be keyboard warriors, but so are a lot of other generations. And they fear using the phone because they lack the tools and the techniques and the skills to make the calls. And often companies need to understand that while generations have traits and different mindsets, millennials are like everyone else. We're reluctant to change, especially when we don't have the skill. So removing the fear is all about understanding and belief that they can make that call. And by the way, it's like confidence. The only way that you can get confidence is to put down the phone at the end of a successful call and say, I did it. So it's about how you teach them and the tools you give anybody who has call reluctance to actually get across that line. And it's one of the things I've worked with a lot of people on. And it's I have to say, it's one of the rewarding sides of my work is when somebody actually does get to that point where they feel comfortable on the phone.
Well, it's funny you should mention the millennials because you're the second person in 2 podcasts to mention millennials perhaps not picking the phone up.
Well, I think they're fantastic. I do. I love working with them because they are great learners. It's only if they don't understand something that troubles come. But, that could be said of all generations that one works with, I think.
And that's true. I mean, it was Nick Davies last week that we were talking to, and he talked about the fact that if you had a little machine in your hand that you typed into and you could send a message, but it didn't yet make a phone call, when it did then make a phone call as it evolved, you'd be thrilled to not have to type on a tiny keyboard anymore, and you'd be able to just do the voice bit. And yet, it is the other way around. People still prefer to tap rather than to talk. And yet, when you've got things like Alexa and Siri...
Yes, and Siri. I think that it's interesting to look at evolution of technology when you compare it to time. I mean, if you look at the history of the phone, 1874 was the very first public phone call. And, in the weeks up to that phone call, debate was raging in the pubs, in the press, on the streets and in the parlours. What word are we going to use to answer the very first phone call? Because there wasn't a word. And Alexander Graham Bell, he said, well, when one answers the phone, one should say, ahoy there. Ahoy there? What's he doing? Hailing a ship? I can't imagine my 86-year-old mother answering the phone that way.
No.
But, on the other side of the Atlantic, Thomas Edison, who's also credited with inventing the phone, he said, look, I've got an idea. Why don't we take the greeting that we use when we meet on the street? Let's take out the letter A, put in the letter E, and use the word hello. And hello is a unique word created just to answer the telephone. And when you come screaming forward over 140 years later, the telephone is still the most used piece of equipment in the modern workplace. So it makes a lot of sense to develop telephone technique because I can tell you this, the phone is here to stay.
Well, it is. I can't think if you didn't have the telephone, how you would communicate in voice. I mean, we haven't got there yet, but maybe in 10, 15 years, there'll be something starting to simmer. Who knows? I don't know enough about AI to know the answer to that yet.
I can't wait for that. I mean, the interesting thing from my perspective as a business by phone specialist and someone who speaks and trains about telephone technique, Linda, is that by 2020, these futurist experts are predicting that we'll have anywhere between 30 to 40% of the workforce replaced by AI, robotics technology, and software development. But most of these futurists, they point out that 70% of the remaining workforce will end up being higher paid and saving much more time because of artificial intelligence influence in their workday. Now, that means people in business will be expected to engage far more with clients and customers than ever before. So in many ways, the future predictions indicate there'll be a higher level of human-to-human engagement in the new age ahead because of artificial intelligence. And I believe the phone will play a huge role in creating positive customer as well as communications in general between human to human. As I say, I believe the phone is here to stay, Linda.
Well, I mean, do you ever send an email or do you always pick the phone up?
Oh, I believe that email has a very strong place, and in a lot of the customer care programs that we develop, the email is very powerful, and it's an integral component that backs up any phone campaign in a business-to-business environment. But as you found in this podcast, trying to get a word in edgeways for someone like me who's just keeps on going on, the telephone allows you to be more descriptive. It allows you to actually build rapport. It's very difficult to do that on cold, hard text unless you've built a relationship before. So to answer that, yes, email plays a vital role. So does text for some of my clients. Very, very important in what they do. And some of them love Twitter. Some of them love LinkedIn. Wherever it is that you need to position yourself in terms of communication with your customers, it's never wrong. But my point is that the telephone cuts through a lot of that and allows you to have that wonderful engagement that very few other mediums allow you.
And I think because more and more people are resorting or falling back on, I wouldn't say resorting necessarily, to using email, because then it's somebody else's problem, isn't it? They've replied to an email or they've sent something, it's off their in tray, they don't have to think about it, it's gone. But, I mean, I would think also, you sound like you might be a little bit like me. When somebody first makes contact with you, Matthew, and they're looking for your services, I pick the phone up and I ring them back. And they're astounded half the time. And I don't want to go into this conversation too much because I literally discussed it last week with Nick on the podcast.
Right.
But it's not something that folk do. It's easy to just hit reply.
Well, and that's true. I think, again, that is fear of technique. You know, a lot of people say to themselves, I don't have to make the call. I can just hide behind the keyboard and send that out, job done. The problem is there's no planning. There's no roadmap for a call before they pick the phone up. They haven't considered that they need to have an introduction that may only be 30 to 40 seconds long, but they need to know every single word that's going to fall out of their mouth first. That will give them the confidence to begin the call. Then they need to, in their roadmap to the call, be able to decide what it is they're going to say. What are the key points? Just put a bullet points down if you have, and then cover those off in the call. And then you have a close to the call. Now, that could just be a farewell or a call to action or whatever it is. But too many people try to wing phone calls all the time. And if you're winging it, you'll never get consistency and you won't develop the good things. You just end up with a whole load of bad habits. A phone call goes sideways on you and you say, I'm never picking up the phone again. It scares the life out of me. People are rude to me. Because, of course, the main reason people are rude to you on the phone is because they feel safe. They wouldn't dream of talking to you like that if they met you face to face. No. But on the other end of the phone, they feel safe. And when you understand that, it also stops you being fearful that, you know, obviously people have got their own problems. It's not always yours to own.
No, and I guess with the mobile phones now, and you ring somebody's mobile, because a lot of business cards have the mobile and don't have an office direct line anymore because we're all on mobile, you never know if they're in countdown or if they've got the children with them in the car or whatever's going on when the call gets through. So if they're a little bit harried, you might think it's because you've intruded on them.
Yes, and I think that essentially telephone technique and telephone skills can help you protect against that kind of issue going sideways on a call. If you're calling someone in a business environment, there is a whole group of people that would turn around and say, well, why did you answer the phone if you're in a meeting?
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Linda, but I'll never be rude enough to answer my phone in a meeting, and unless it's the birth of a child or something really urgent I'm expecting like that. Because I'm engaged across a table with somebody. But a lot of people that answer their phone and say they're in a meeting, do you know what? 98% of them, I think, are fibbers. They're saying that to get rid of you because there's also a psychological thing that says if I stay on the phone, buy something because I'm a sucker. So I'll tell them that I'm too busy to talk. And so having phone technique to help you overcome that. For example, if someone says to you, look, they're way too busy and they can't talk to you right now, and it's pretty much a unique call, then having something sensible to say is that, okay, I'll call you back later. Well, that's just crazy. Yeah. That's not going to get you any further. But saying to someone, look, Linda, I do understand there's that power word. You're busy at the moment. But, you know, this phone call will take about 4.5 minutes of your time unless you've got questions. Is that okay with you? Now, you're not supposed to say that, Linda. You're supposed to say, okay, I'll call you back later. And most prospects and people that you speak to, they only have one response. I'm too busy. I've got no money. I'm not interested. These are all the same responses, really, just said in a different way. So when you come back with something that's genuine and authentic, that is different from everybody else, they don't have anything else to say. I've got a whole bunch of callers that could tell you that when they use that kind of technique, they can't get the person off the phone at the end of 15 minutes because they've become engaged. They want to tell you all about everything to do about their family before they exit the call. So it's, again, all about engagement and technique to get there.
So when you come across an answer phone, should you leave a message? Or should you just think, no, I'm going to actually try and speak to the human?
Okay, it depends on the circumstance. I recommend several different ways of doing it. Now, often, if it's a business call and it's you haven't got any form of relationship with the person you're trying to communicate with, let's take, say, a selling situation, what's the point in leaving a message that says, oh, look, hello, it's Matthew calling from XYZ company. We deal in photocopiers, and can you give me a call back a little later on my phone? I mean, no one wants to hear that, do they?
And no, and they won't act on that either, will they? Why would they?
Well, it's not going to happen. And then you get people say, no one ever rings me back. And I go, oh, surprise. So what's a good message to leave? Here's an example. Look, Linda, hello. Look, it's Matthew Mewse calling. I recently came across an idea that might need your opinion and your feedback. And I would very much appreciate it if you could give me a call, because your opinion counts to us. Can you give me a call? And I'll be here between 4 and 5 o'clock today. Thanks a lot. Now, what you're doing is piquing curiosity. Mm-hmm. And my idea is I need to talk to you about whether you are happy every time you open your bill each month and you have a look at it. Are you happy with the money that you're being charged for your photocopier? So that's my second engagement. But first engagement is to get you to answer the phone. But ultimately, I believe that sooner or later that telephone will be answered. And it's far better to continue to call that number if it's a prospect that's researched in your lead list and you know should stack up, that your product is good, your service is good, and you need to engage, because sooner or later they will answer that phone. It's about a patience thing, if that makes sense.
It does, and it also comes away from throwing enough mud at the throwing enough mud at the wall, and some will stick, isn't it? If you've got those qualified leads, you know that they stack up. Just persevere.
Absolutely, and be authentic as you do it. I mean, I often get the other thing. I bounced off stage at a conference the other week, and a fella came up and asked me the reverse of that. He said, why won't people leave messages on my answer phone, on my business answer phone? And I said, well, let's have a listen to it. And when I listened to it, I knew why. It went a bit like this. It said, look, hello, welcome to Spanners. You've reached our answer phone. I mean, nobody wants to hear that. So they were losing a whole lot of calls right at the It then went on to say, all of our lines are busy and our people are busy at the moment. I mean, nobody wants to hear that either. So they're losing another load there. The answer phone message then went on to say, really infer that I had no idea how an answer phone worked. It simply said, well, if you leave your name, your phone number, and a brief message after the beep, we'll get back to you if we can be bothered, kind of thing. So no wonder he wasn't getting messages left. So I always say to people, look, you can do this if it's on your mobile, your personal or your business. The whole idea is to get people to leave messages for you so you can make decisions about that call. So it's far better to be short and sharp. And if you were to ring my business line, my mobile, this is what you'd hear. You'd hear, hello, this is the phone for Matthew Mewse, the telephone man. Well done. You rang the right phone. You did good. That's what that says. I then go on to say, look, I'm glad you rang me. You see, glad's a human emotion. It's not a machine you're talking to. We're engaging suddenly. So I'm glad you rang me. Leave me a message and I promise, power word again, you see how that got slipped in there? And I promise I'll call you back as soon as I can. Beep. And before you know it, 70% of the people ringing your answer phone leave a message. It's very simple, but it works.
And the great Jack Daly, for those that have ever listened to Jack Daly or seen him on stage, he also has a thought on the answer phone for your mobile, and that it should be changed every day. His ideas are that you should say, today is, hello, this is Jack Daly, sorry I can't take your call, but I'm actually in conference until about 3 o'clock. I'll give you a call back then. Hope you have a great day. But he'll put the date at the beginning, say that you know that it's up to date and it's fresh as well. And if he's gone fishing, he'll say, I'm gone fishing. I'm taking some downtime so that I can, get ready for a presentation that I'm doing tomorrow. Okay, Matthew, well, we're pretty much there now. So then what's your top tip to give the audience today?
Oh, goodness. So many top tips, but here's one that people find really useful. Have you ever thought about how you answer the phone? Linda, everywhere I go, I hear people answer the phone. They say, hello, Matthew speaking. They say, hello, Linda speaking. Mm-hmm. It's a bit impersonal, isn't it? I mean, it's a bit third party. I don't go for a stroll out along the street, wave at people, say, hello, this is Matthew walking. It's just doesn't seem right. So I always recommend that you're in the here and now. And here's a great way of answering the telephone. And if you like, you can put your company name up the front, or if it's just even your personal answer phone, you can do your personal phone. You can do the same. So when somebody rings, it might go like this: "Hello, this is Matthew." It's as simple as that. You just say who you are.
Yes.
Hello, welcome to Supersize Your Sales. This is Matthew, and your caller's first response is, "Hello, Matthew. It's John calling. It's Linda calling." So by just saying this is, what happens is you build instant rapport instead of this removed, "Hello, Matthew speaking." So you're always looking to improve your initial engagement. What is it Oscar Wilde says? You get one chance to make a first impression. Yes. I happen to believe in that.
Yes, I'm just thinking what I normally say. I used to say Linda here, and then I stopped, and now I say, hello, Linda speaking. So I need to change mine. You'll find you'll get engagement yet again on another level. Every little bit helps, don't you think? I do indeed. All right, well, what would your one final piece of advice, life, love, anything, the universe, doesn't have to be about phone calls, it can be about absolutely anything. What would it be, Matthew?
I think, to be honest, Linda, to embrace change, but to keep up. I encourage people to keep up in this wonderful world that we're hurtling along with at the moment. Technology in particular. It's not rocket science, the technology we have, but don't get left behind. This was kind of brought home to me recently. On a wave of enthusiasm, Linda, I went and bought my 86-year-old mum a smartphone. I know I can hear some of your listeners shaking their head already. So I went round to see her, and I showed her the phone. We spent a couple of hours. She was ever so patient with me, and I explained how you text and how you called and how it all worked. And I said, "Are you happy with it now, Mum?" She said, yeah, hi, Matthew. I said, "All right, I'll give you a call on your smartphone over the next couple of days." Okay. So for 2 days, she wouldn't answer a smartphone. I never got a call. And on day 3, I snapped. I thought, I'll ring her on the landline. She answered the phone. I said, "Look, Mum, you're not using your new phone." She said, "It's broken, Matthew." I said, What do you mean it's broken? "It's not working." I said, "Okay, I'll come over and I'll have a look." Mm-hmm. So I get over. "Let me have a look at your phone." I turn the phone on. It's working okay. She's just taken 147 pictures of her left ear. So keeping up with technology is very important, and not getting left behind. And really embrace change. That would be my tip and advice.
I'm going to think of your 86-year-old mother now. Okay, so the final question is, where can people find out more about you, Matthew? What is the website you want to take people to?
Our website, which is supersizeyoursales.com, is that we believe that giving a lot of stuff away for people to go and try means that if it works, they'll come back and use us, our books and our services, our training even more. So you'll find a lot of resource pages to do with the telephone, to do with how the whole thing fits together as customer and client contact campaigns, and download away, go for it, and try those things and adapt them in your own business. You'll find they make a difference. Okay, so that's supersizeyoursales.com. That's right.
Excellent. Well, it's been lovely talking to you, Matthew. I'm going to change my answer phone message and how I answer the phone for the future.
Okay. Hey, wonderful to talk to you as well, Linda. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
You're welcome. You've been listening to Tell Us a Story. Why not subscribe or rate us next time you're on iTunes?